things that we wanted to do was learn a little bit more in layperson's terms, what this is going to affect us, the street officers on the street, how we're going to use it, how we're going to do it, what works, what's new, will we still have DAC channels, will we still have data channels, where do we go for this, where do we go for that? So we put it together. And I was sat through the first one 2 weeks ago when we did it, and I thought it was very informative. I mean, when Chad and Rick talked, they're explaining it to us in layperson's terms. You don't need a degree from MIT to figure this stuff out. I thought it was very informative. They get a little history of where we were at, where we're going, and so on and so forth. As the chief said, we got handouts over there for everybody that's got it, and Chad's going to start out. Rick was supposed to be here first because he's got another commitment he's got to get to. So if Rick shows up here at some point in time, Chad might stop what he's doing, let Rick go, and pick it up from there. But I'm sure we'll survive through it, and it'll be very informative as it was last time. So without any further ado here, I'll turn it over to Chad Fleck from DaneCom, or Dane County 911 Center. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Good morning. I'm just getting set up here a little bit. But, I'm Chad Fleck, for those of you that don't know who I am. Some notable changes. We had to update a few things because of the new DaneCom system, which is not up yet. Last I heard, Chad will tell you more about that. Memorial Day, Labor Day, January 1.
Christmas.
Some undetermined year. Sometime. Well, you had to say that.
Before you start, Bobby, can I just,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
St. Baldrick's raising money for childhood cancer research.
What Rick's going to talk about is the Dane County Radio Communications Protocol. We currently have version 1 in the town's policy. You also have a copy of our radio communications policy, which we're not going to really talk about, but everybody has signed off on the policy. The protocol is an attachment to the policy, which means you've read this and understand it and are held to it. So once version 2, what we're going to talk about today, gets approved through the multiple approval processes it has to go through, that will update our policy. I'll update our policy, then add edition 2 on there. So we'll all sign off on that as well. So I thought this was a good way for you to learn the differences from version 1 to version 2 as we're going into this. So I just wanted to throw that out there for my staff. Other agencies, what your department does, if you adopt it, if you use it, I'm not sure, but this is what our department does. Thanks, Rick.
All right. So I don't have a red line version, so I'm not going to talk huge about the differences. One of the things that you may or may not notice if you've ever read the protocol is that it's okay to be nice on the radio now, on our side and on your side. It's okay to be nice on the radio now.
18 years of hostility.
Stop it. But are you done now? Done being hostile toward us?
You can tell Jim's talking about.
She's just watching out for you. She just cares about you. Talk about fault.
That's what it's all about?
That's what it's all about.
Oh.
It's all about. You're not used to that. See, where some parade, not everybody was nice. We care.
But I do like gentlemen.
She's doing her best up there. All right, beginning and ending tour of duty. Our preference is that each individual officer goes 41 and 42. That's our preference because of the CAD. It's much easier for us to keep track of each individual officer goes 41 and 42. We understand that some people like to go 41 and 42 in groups. I'm not going to point any fingers. Some like to go 41 and 42 in groups. If you're going to do that, at least do what you're doing now, which is to call us first, tell us you're going to give us the lineup, and then wait for us to acknowledge it. But our preference is that each individual officer goes 41 and 42 at once. We'll talk about all stuff. And if you have any questions while we're talking about this, let me know. Just as I go through this, I'm looking to see if I see anything in particular that's...
Rick?
That's
Can I bring up the on-duty, off-duty?
Yes.
And that's especially important if you're using a portable that's not assigned to you, because dispatch can recognize that portable as being assigned to you, and that way you can let them know your portable is a spare number 2, so they can have that information in the system for you for the shift.
when DaneCom comes up. Right now, you're
Right.
very anonymous, but when DaneCom comes up, yeah, you'll all have radio numbers. I don't know what they're all gonna say. I know what yours are gonna say, but I don't know what everybody else's are gonna say. So if you go 41 and you're using a radio that's not your own, let us know that, so that if you run into trouble and start clicking your mic, we at least know who to look for. Thank you. Self-assigning, self-initiating is something that's new with the new MDCs, which only affects you guys in this room, I think, right? Monroe?
Cross Plains.
Where's Cross Plains? Oh, sorry.
It's okay, I like being anonymous.
But are you letting your officers use the MDC to self-initiate?
Depends what it's for.
Okay. Traffic stops?
Negative,
Okay.
big negative.
All right. In your department, your policy, you get to decide what you want. We don't mind if they do that, but you have to tell us what's going on. The officers have to tell us that they're out on a traffic stop. And the reason I say that is because dispatchers are auditory. The CAD is a really busy CAD. If you've not been up there, I strongly encourage you to go up there, not only to see the CAD, but also to sit along and see what we do and how we do it. I don't know if you've seen the news in the last, say, I don't know, months, but we've been in it about a few things that we're doing. One of them is one of them is the CAD, one of them is the radio system that's not up yet. One of them is the call-taking process with EPD, EMD, EFD, the medical protocols that we use. If you've not been up there in a while, or if you've never been up there, I encourage you to come up and sit along, not just to see the CAD, but also to understand the process that the dispatchers go through, both from the call-taking standpoint and from the dispatching standpoint. It's not as easy as it used to be. The CAD is a really busy CAD, and that's with only looking at one department, only looking at one agency. Law has two different agencies. It's Madison Police or it's Sheriff, and everything is Sheriff if it's not Madison Police. So Oregon and Cross Plains and Town of Madison, they're all under the Sheriff category. So if you make a traffic stop and you don't tell us about it and it just pops up on the CAD, it's likely, particularly when it's busy, that dispatchers aren't going to see that. So you have to audibilize. I don't know if that's a word, but it sounds good. You have to speak it so we hear it. Dispatchers key in on what people are saying, not what they're seeing in the CAD. So please keep that in mind. Self-initiating, self-assigning, if you're going to do it, whether we clear you or not, we work that out. But please let us know. That's the whole point of it. 911 disconnects. Nothing has changed about that. We're still not sending officers to phase 1, abandoned calls, where we get a voicemail and call back. Everything else we're still sending cops to. Phase 2, off a tower face. I'm sorry, a phase 1 off a tower face with an open line. We'll still tell you about of what value that is to you. I don't know. You guys decide. But phase 2's generally a decent location, and we're dispatching it to those locations. And then landlines, which barely exist anymore, we're sending to.
Go back to self-assign and self-initiate. If you are self-assigning yourself to a call, we're still supposed to radio in and notify dispatch, not
Yeah,
just-
yeah. And
Because
so
there's a self-assign button.
You know,
Try that.
so just after I tell you that you should come and see us, I've not seen a CAD, I'm not seeing an MDC yet on the CAD side of things, on your side of things. And town, do you guys have, I don't remember, do you guys have self-assigned buttons?
We can self-initiate, not self-assign.
Self-initiate, but not self-assign. You can only self-assign on the TriTech side of things.
Correct.
Okay. So I've not seen a TriTech, and maybe I saw it once, but it didn't mean anything to me because it was early on in our training. If you hit the self-assign button, you can do that 2 ways. You can assign yourself for those who have for Mount Orab and Cross Plains. You can assign yourself to a call that's pending in the queue, or you can assign yourself to a call that's already been dispatched. But if you do that, please tell us about that as well.
Just real quick, Cottage Grove, we can self-initiate but not self-assign, so you don't need us, we don't have to come on the radio every time we self-initiate, are we gonna end up with 2 calls?
No. If you self-initiate, you'll put yourself on a call, then just audible it to us so that we know that you put yourself out on a traffic stop or a building check or whatever it is.
So you
Right.
do want us to.
We
Okay.
still want to hear about it every time you do something that's self-initiated. We still want to hear about it so that the dispatcher remembers it. All right. VARDA alarms, I don't know how many departments have VARDA alarms for the new system. So, and it's a VARDA type alarm. VARDA is a brand name. They don't know that we use that to talk about every type of alarm that's a VARDA type alarm. If you work for VARDA, we're sorry. So it's VARDA, it's Sentinel, there's a couple others I think out there. Hold up and panic and manually activated alarms. This is going to be a work in progress for us, because now when you hear us tone out a call, you'll hear it over the county side and the city side simultaneously. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to do that with the new system when it comes up. So if we can't do that with the new system, it means that the sheriff dispatcher is going to have to tone it, and the city dispatchers are going to have to tone it. The city dispatchers can tone it simultaneously between channel 1 and channel 3, but the sheriff's side won't be able to select those channels because we're operating under a different system. So keep that in mind. There may be some delays in toning those panic alarms and hold-up alarms and things of that nature. Our expectation from my end for dispatch doesn't change, however. That is that we are still to tone those countywide, regardless of the location, because we don't know who's where, and we don't know who might be close to assist. Does that make sense? Radio alarms. So this is going to be a whole new world for all of you. I don't know who's going to have radio alarms activated and who's not. You guys have yours activated?
The towns will be activated.
Okay. Onward. Chief?
I think ours will be too.
Okay. So radio alarms are a different world, and I've not heard them yet, so I don't know if they're going to be audible. The cities used to be audible. They're not audible anymore. You'd hear that squawk on the radio. You knew that somebody was either in trouble or whatever. Now, with the city radios, when they hit the alarm button, it just opens up 10 seconds of open air, so we can hear what's going on. I don't know if there's going to be an audible on the user side of it, or if it's just going to be an open air thing. Or
We're working on that. Currently, the only thing that we've been able to push through the system is when somebody pushes their emergency button, it sends a signal to dispatch saying there's an emergency, and treats everyone to 10 seconds of audio from that mic. It will also indicate on everyone's radio that this particular radio has pushed its emergency button. So you'll know by the radio ID who has set off their alarm. One other thing that we're working on with Harris is actually the ability to strip off the audio. The Sheriff's Department would like that audio to be stripped off, so it's simply an alert that goes out to everyone, in which case there would be some type of a visual indication to the field units that this particular radio pushed their emergency button. Going to be one of the two.
Thanks.
But that gives us like 10 seconds to scream.
Yes.
What we need.
Yes.
If your radio is programmed that way to give that 10-second open mic.
And you said the sheriff's department's not going to have a 10
Sheriff's
seconds?
Department doesn't want that because the problem with that is when you push your emergency button and you're automatically sending out that 10 seconds of audio, your radio has top priority over anyone else. I mean, which is a good thing, but I think the Sheriff's Department's rationale is, well, what if somebody else wanted to jump on and say something that was equally or more important, indicating they were responding or something, they wouldn't be able to do that.
And this is where it's important that dispatch knows that that's your portable,
Right.
so they can identify that portable to that officer and hopefully know about where you are.
I'm just writing that down so I don't forget about the 10 seconds of open air, but not for the sheriff's department.
Yeah, the Sheriff's Department might end up doing that if we're technically unable to pass the alarm through.
The good news about that, though, is that we can still talk out. So with that 10 seconds of open air, kind of like an open mic right now, we can still talk over it. So as long as we're using our control stations in dispatch, when we're out in the field on a special assignment, whatever it is, rhythm and booms or Mifflin Street block party or whatever it is, we're just using a regular base station, so we don't have priority air like the dispatch does. But if you bump your alarm and there's not a problem, the only ones who can talk over you are us. If others try calling in, we may or may not hear them, probably very similar to what we hear now. So when you hear a couple of units talk at the same time, you know what that sound is. That may sound like the same thing. All right, tactical channels. The nice thing about DaneCom when it comes up is we'll have a plethora of tactical channels instead of one or two like we have right now. The other theory is that not only will we have DaneCom tactical channels, but we'll also have kind of off-network VHF, mutual aid type channels like VLA 31, aka Whispering, and VCall 10, VTAC 11, 12, 13, I think. I don't remember how far we're going up to.
We're only going VCall 10 and VTAC 12,
VTAC 12.
VTAC 31.
Okay, but the other good news about that is you will have access to other channels, so when you're out at Fort McCoy until they get the range done out at MATC, or out at the shooting range, when you're doing all of your training, you'll have access to, actually you probably have access to those channels now and don't know it, but you'll have access to mutual aid channels that you can run operations on off network, so it's not on the DaneCom system. But the good news is we'll have event channels like the city has, and we'll have 3 additional tactical channels that are just law tactical channels. We're still trying to decide how we're going to run operations where town fire is out with town police, who's out with city police, who's out with city of Madison fire, because we'd like to be able to get you talking on one channel if that becomes necessary. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but it's something that we'd like to have the capability of. The only caveat to that is that Highway is not really excited about having anybody talk on their radio channel. So, here.
If I can butt in here a little bit, Rick. There's a handout, it looks like this at the front. If you page through that, there are zones A through Z, and that's how we are programming the town's radios. There's some changes that I've made that aren't on here yet. But you'll see, like on Zone A, hopefully every law radio in Dane County will have that particular zone. Quite honestly, we're hoping every law radio has Zone A through T or U or V, something like that, exactly the same for every law radio. And then our home zone, or your agency's home zone, would be Zone Z. I just wanted to throw that in there.
And I appreciate that because some departments will have Z and then they'll have Y and they'll have X. All of the things that they use in their home area, and the reason that we want Zone A the same for everybody, at least Zone A the same for everybody, but also E for events and T for tactical, is that if we tell you to go to Zone A channel 9, that's VLA 31 and should be VLA 31 in everybody's radio on Zone A channel 9.
And Zone A will hopefully be programmed in every law, fire, and EMS radio
Yeah.
for easy communications between disciplines.
We're hoping that's going to happen. It sounds like it's going to happen. I've not heard anyone who's not. There are some people who are confused about it, but we've tried to help them through that. So let's hope that that happens. Vehicle contacts and person contacts, that stays pretty much the same. The only thing that really changes is, and I don't remember where we put it in the protocol right now off the top of my head, but we want, you can do whatever you want. You don't tell us everything you do, but we know that. All we want to know about is every time you're out with somebody or every time you're making a contact where safety is a question. So on a traffic stop, you're contacting a person, whatever it is, we just want to know about that, not because we want to know everything you do, but because we want to know in case the shit hits the fan, where you are, so we can send you help. And that's the other key about checking out places. If you hit a radio alarm and we don't know where you are, that's bad for you if you need help. That's why we need to know where you are. That's kind of the basic, how the dispatcher, I have a good relationship with God, because if you don't tell your dispatcher. Emergency radio traffic stays the same.
Good job.
The expectation is that every time we're on emergency radio traffic, there's a channel marker on. Don't know what the channel marker is gonna sound like yet. I've also been told, and Chad's not in the room, I've also been told that there are like 30 or 40 or 50 different alert tones that we could use. We're using 3. Well, we could have an alert tone for every individual officer in the county, I suppose, if we really wanted to. But we're not gonna do that. How many alert tones? So there's not more than 3?
Nope, not more than 3.
I was led to believe there were like 30 or 40 different.
No, 3.
Okay, good. So we're only gonna use 3 anyway, even if there were 100. Vehicle pursuits, foot pursuits, that stays the same, with the understanding that a lot of departments are going away from pursuits just for the sake of pursuing. And some of you may think that's a sad day. Some dispatchers are a little disappointed in that. But your policy says serious or violent felonies or something?
The town is violent felony.
Okay. A lot of agencies are going to that. As a matter of fact, there's a move afoot to try to make that countywide, at least a discussion. We tried that once, several years ago. All right, vehicle pursuits. The other thing that I'm really working on with our dispatchers is getting patches between the city and the county. That's particularly important for you guys, you folks. It's really important for the sheriff's department when they're operating in Burke and Woodland Grove and the cities close by. For Ona, it's entirely possible that you'll end up in the city or the city will end up by you. I'm really working very hard on getting people patching those channels so that I don't have to rely on me and Chad talking back and forth. And all of you should have direct communications with the officers. We will be able to, we can't now. Yeah, we will be able to. We'll have a lot more capabilities for patching, to include some Prairie, Stoughton, Fitchburg. We can already patch UW. We can already patch Capital. We can already patch Monona. And Middleton will be a new one too. So that'll be really nice. Plus Middleton will have MPD channels, so they can talk back and forth there if they need to. It'll be nice. The new system, when it comes up, will be great when it comes to interoperability. Except for the aforementioned toning, but we'll work through that. High-risk vehicle contacts, we just changed it. We changed the name from felony stops or high-risk stops to vehicle contacts because that's consistent with how you train, and I want our folks to understand the terminology. So high-risk vehicle contacts, otherwise, nothing else changes other than where we're going to put people on the radios. Simulcast, again, simulcast, the question is, can we simulcast between systems? And it appears right now that we cannot. Now, that may change, but right now, as it stands today, it appears we cannot.
You mean as far as like the broadcast on 800 versus?
Like when we do alert tones for hold-up alarms and
Yeah, I mean, it's clunky the way it works right, or the way it will work. It can be done, but it's not ideal.
so we'll talk some more offline about that, the ISSI, the whatever. There's some linking that we can do that maybe will make it better. Mutual aid, I don't think anything about this changed except to say, and I think all of you know this already, alert tones are not an automatic request for mutual aid, they're just advisory. And dispatchers are authorized to send mutual aid only when they believe an officer's life or safety is in danger. So if you're out on something somewhere, we can't raise you, and your partner's busy, it's entirely possible that we will send anybody we can find to come and help you. We don't care what color the uniform is, we don't care what their patch says on it. All we want for you is a gun and a badge. We should have been doing that all along. I hope we have. But if you make a specific request in the town of Madison, if you specifically request Fitchburg, that's who we call. That's who we should be calling. CAPMAR. CAPMAR is the law enforcement version of MAVIS. So an established mutual aid plan based on location, based on whatever the administrator in the department decides they need for a particular incident. If you have a really big crash on the belt line and you need to shut the belt line down, and you ask for a CATMAR response, CATMAR may include Fitchburg and the city and Capitol and State Patrol and Middleton and Monona and whoever else it may include. CATMAR is a great thing for, well, I would argue it's a great thing for everybody. It's a really great thing for dispatch. MAVIS was a great thing for dispatch because it didn't cause us to have to come up with a response. From the fire service standpoint, it was great for them because it was already pre-planned, so all they had to do was ask for a box alarm, and we knew who to send. They knew who was coming. The same thing holds true for the police type box alarms, the CATMAR response. This is not a Dane County only thing. This happens actually primarily in the southeast part of the state right now. And they call it a smart response. They use their responses regularly and have used them multiple times in the last few years for the different types of shootings that they've had now. So with that success, the police chiefs put together a committee and it's moving through the process really well. I think all of the departments in Dane County, have agreed to participate.
Yep.
So expect to hear more about that soon, along with some training, and there'll be practice drills, because we're gonna need practice on the dispatch side of it, and you're gonna wanna be more familiar with it as well. So, CATMAR is a good thing, yes? Sir?
Go back to the mutual aid thing. Do you guys consider when you put out the also breather request, do you consider that a mutual aid request?
So, when we put that out, the verbiage is, if you're trained, equipped, and in the area, advise dispatch. I can't tell you that that's an automatic mutual aid request from your department standpoint, and I don't know if it is or not.
It is not for the town.
Okay, but for Mount Horeb, I don't know if it's changed. It used to be.
It's still the same.
Still the same, so Mount Horeb, if they hear it and it's in a Mount Horeb fire district, they will still go. And the goal for that, I'm glad you asked that, Mike, the goal for that is, gee, we'd really like to help this person really fast. So let us know, and I would imagine, unless your department says differently, if you came up on the radio and said, I've got an AED and I'm close, we're probably gonna send you whatever, I don't know how you feel about that, but at that point, our goal is to get out there as quickly as we can and try to get pads on somebody and save a life.
Chances are, I don't care, because at that point, you're giving us mutual aid from the city. So, assuming that's where the P&B is at.
Right,
So the city might care.
they might,
They might.
right up until you save a life.
But they've turned us down in the past to respond to them.
So you have to get permission from them if I'm saying I'm right up front of the house.
So, yeah, I
Like,
guess
sit there and
I would,
wait and-
right, isn't that stupid? I'm sorry.
That is
it's just-
really
I had that happen once. I was virtually on the street, 30 yards in front of the address, and responded and said, the city fires are out.
One day, we'll get rid of the political lines, right? And lives will matter, and we won't care about the political lines. I don't know. I don't see that happening in my lifetime. Most of us in this room. It is dumb, I agree.
We tried to get one.
Data request, the reason that data request is in here is the goal is that if you want a
There's a
record,
liability issue.
that you would call data for that record. There are exceptions to that when you're out in the middle of the blood and guts on the belt line, and you don't have time to switch to channel 3 or channel whatever it's gonna be soon. Make the request, someone can take care of that. But if it's just a routine record request or a cab request or whatever it is, we ask you to switch the data to do that, to keep channel 1 free. Soon, hopefully, we'll split the county so that there's more available airtime. Maybe we can handle some different things then. Although I will tell you from a manager standpoint, I don't want dispatchers on the radio also making phone calls, because I don't want them to miss whatever it is that they might miss. That's why, that's the primary reason we don't want requests coming through on channel 1 for records and for whatever else.
How far around is the split county dispatch, do you think?
Thank you.
Just started.
It's a fair question. I'd like to see it happen this year. I don't know if it will. But I'd love to see it happen this year, and I think many of you would like to see it happen like 2 years ago.
How would they split it?
I don't know. I'm thinking of drawing a line.
In the half mile.
I'm thinking it's gonna be a north-south line, so it's an east-west split. Very similar to the way the county splits things. So Oregon will split right in the middle, just like always, so the east side of Oregon gets the,
That's our problem. South of us, strictly south is Brooklyn, who's in southwest. North of us is the town, and Pittsburgh, which is southwest, but we're southeast.
yeah.
Actually, our preference would be everybody on one channel and Beltline Bob on another.
If you could hit with one channel, that would be great. Rallying cars.
I'm in for
We
this.
should probably talk to Chad about that.
100
screens.
Come on, Chad, help us out.
It's not just the town, it's everybody.
And I like them, but
He does talk a lot. All right, that's
Radio friendly.
that's really all I have about that, other than to say, there are some definitions in the back of this document that talk about the difference between analog and digital and conventional versus trunked. Just interesting to know about. There will be no test later, at least I'm not assessing one, maybe you will, but I won't. And the idea that when the radios are programmed, we're hopefully going to get copies of that so that we know, we want to know that everybody's zone A is the same, to include all responders within the county, all emergency responders within the county. And we know that Z is your local, whatever it's going to be, channel, your local bank. Other than that, there's a lot of things to get used to with the new radios when you get them programmed. I don't know if you have them programmed in your squads yet. I don't remember.
We have two portables that are programmed that are on the front.
Okay. It's a whole different world from, certainly from the old days when you pushed a button to grab a channel. And I don't remember.
Why are you looking at me, Rick?
Because you and I remember that, or Mike probably remember that. I don't know if many other people will remember that.
Can we talk about 10 codes real briefly?
No. Related to 10 codes, our preference is to get away from 10 codes completely. That's the preference across the United States with plain language. Certainly from the fire service, and the fire service has made a really good transition away from 10 codes. Most of the fire service has. Some of the fire service still uses some 10 codes, but the law enforcement, 10 codes are really deeply entrenched in law enforcement for whatever reason, and I understand it. Some counties, Burt works in Greene County, everything is 10 codes. State Patrol uses 10 codes religiously for everything. I know. Yeah. We're really trying to get away from that here. We know that there are some 10 codes you're always going to use, 1032, 1033. 10.1 and 10.2 we're going to use, 10.4 we're going to use. There's a list of those in here, what? 1046. Yeah. Yeah. So there are plenty of things that there are still reasons for 10 codes, although if you can get away from that and use plain language, in a lot of those cases that would be helpful. 1033 is very, very simple and everybody knows what it means. 1032 is pretty simple and everybody knows what that means. We find that some agencies, or some officers coming from agencies outside of Dane County use 10 codes and we don't know necessarily what they are. So that's part of the reason. And what we found at the Capitol was, even within the state, people have different things for 10 codes, different definitions for their 10 codes. So people were using a 10 code that was synonymous for us with something important, and it didn't mean anything important to them in their 10 code role. So plain language is the way we'd like to do it, especially when you're dealing with other responders in the same incident. So we're dealing with fire, EMS, and police. Get away from 10 codes as much as we can. So that's our preference with 10 codes. We understand that there are some. We understand law enforcement has a rich history of 10 codes. Some of us know what they are and some don't. So assume people don't and use as much plain language as you can.
Are you training with that?
Very, very briefly, we try to get them to stay with the plain language. But understanding that some cops are going to say it. Also understand that, so we had a fatal accident in the city not long ago, where the officer reported it as a 10-7. And the dispatcher, who was from another county that used 10-7, understood what 10-7 meant, and that meant out of service. And in data, the parking enforcement people use 10-7 to mean they want to brake. So she couldn't understand why this cop wanted to brake when it was a very serious accident. And so finally,
That's what it means to me.
finally, when the officer, who's an old school officer, said, I have a DOA, she understood it. But that was a great example, and I pointed it out to the police department. That's a great example of why 10 codes are not a great thing. Some cases they are. If you say 1032, I know what you mean. And every dispatcher in that room ought to. If you say 1033, I know what you mean. But when you say 10-7, doesn't mean you want to break. Doesn't mean somebody's dead. In old school, we called 10-7s dead. 1042 is another one, but in Green County, they call it something else. In Lafayette County, they use the 10 code for coroner. They're talking about it that way. So, anyway, so that's all I got. Questions, comments?
Any questions for Rick? Dispatch wide, we'll throw them at Rick instead of Chad. Like if you want to ask Rick why they send police to a call and city EMS or to the same accident, you can ask him that.
Why do they do that?
That's a good question.
Great question. Yeah, someone should answer that.
So let's talk about, I gotta run, but let's talk about geography for just a minute. And the way our CAD works is center line, and you guys know this as well as anyone, there were 2 incidents yesterday about center line addressing where the center line divides, in this great case, the town of Madison from the city of Madison. And we pick an address, and we don't know if it's in the town of Madison or the city of Madison because we don't have address points in our CAD. And whatever address we pick is always going to be wrong. I don't know why, but it just always is. And yesterday we did it twice. We sent the town to a city fire and the city to the town fire. It's based on this center line addressing that we have to fix, and I'm told we're in the process of like really close to fixing. That's all I have to say about that. But it's extraordinarily frustrating for a whole lot of people, not the least of which is the fire service. But it also includes you guys, so we'll send you guys to a call that we think is in the city, but it's really in the town, or we'll send you to a call that we think is in the town, but it's really in the city, and it causes unnecessary delays, and it's really, really frustrating. It's frustrating for everybody, including the dispatchers. We're not doing it on purpose. It's just it's a system-wide thing that we're really, really working on fixing. It's not just the city and the town, it's the county and the city with Blooming Grove and Burke, and it's Mount Horeb versus the town of Blue Mounds, and it's all kinds of very frustrating things. And we've tried 2 or 3 different test scenarios so far with dropping address points into the CAD in the test environment, and they've found some problems with it, so they're working on those problems, trying to get them resolved. And so I want to say, I'd love to sit up here and say with a straight face that it'll be done by the end of the month. And I'm really hopeful for that for a whole lot of reasons you can't even imagine. But, so let's hope.
You know what's frustrating about that, Rick, is that if you tell a dispatch that's in the city, that camera, they kind of argue with you sometimes.
And I want to know about that. I'm the operations manager for law enforcement, and I want to know about those problems. I want to be able to fix those problems. And that may be a training issue with our dispatcher, it may be some other issue with the dispatcher, but I need to know about those things, and that's what I want to end with in it, because I really got to run. But if you have problems with the dispatchers, I want to know about those. Whether you file them as a complaint, or whether you send me an email, I don't care, but I need to know about that stuff so I can fix it. I have very high expectations of our staff. For those of you who know me, I held myself to a very high standard as a dispatcher and as a police officer, and I expect of everyone else in my room to hold themselves to a very high standard when they're on the radio. So please tell me when there's problems so I can address them, or I can have the supervisors address them, but I need to know that. So every one of you's been frustrated with something at some point. Tell me what it is and we can work through it, and I will take care of it one way or another.
That's the takeaway point. Communicate. Don't just bitch in the squad room, but communicate with them.
I can't fix it if I don't know it's a problem.
Rick, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. We are going to now move back over to Chad so he can start where we left off.
Thank you, Chad. Okay, I'm kind of just going to start over a little bit here since I'm going to throw out in 30 seconds. But when I'm talking, I may interchange the terms. Sorry, carry on. All right, he's got to go before I'm going to be effective. I don't know if that's going to help. So anyway, two terms that you hear me interchange, and I don't mean to, it just happens, but to avoid some clarification. When I say talk group, think channel. If I say channel, think talk group. They basically mean the same thing for the purposes of this discussion. Now we're talking a little bit about analog. What we have now, again, one transmitter in Verona. Transmits out to everyone. They do have various receive-only sites set up around the county as well. But as technology evolves and the radio spectrum becomes a whole lot more congested, they needed to find out a way of how we can manage this finite piece of radio spectrum. And the VHF radio spectrum, which is where Sheriff's Channel 1 is now and where DaneCom is going to be, is very congested. There's a lot of traffic on it. And you'd think it'd be just as easy as going, okay, well, we've got, Sheriff's Channel 1, 155.655. Well, why can't we just go and create a second channel at 155.654? And the answer is it doesn't really work that way. There's a lot of what I call, for lack of a better term, splatter with a radio channel. And so the FCC came along and said, okay, you can have a radio channel here, but then you have to space it out X number of clicks away in order to have a second channel. So you've got all this space in between radio channels to prevent one from interfering with the other. Well, the problem with that is, so you've got one radio channel, Sheriff's Channel 1 for instance. So if I can somehow demonstrate, let's say the width of this piece of paper represents Sheriff's Channel 1. Well, that's fine, that's ours, we can talk on it all we want. Well, if I had another piece of paper I put here, which would represent the channel right next to it, and then another piece of paper here, which would represent the channel right next to it, nobody can use the two channels on either side of it, because our channel splatters across parts of the channels on either side of it. So, needless to say, the radio spectrum becomes smaller and smaller as far as how many channels can actually fit into a certain area. So, when you think about it, Sheriff's Channel 1, let's take like at midnight on a Sunday. Is it really busy? I don't even quite remember anymore. It's been a while since I worked it, but generally no. Midnight on a Sunday, chances are there's several minutes of any given hour where there's nobody talking on Sheriff's Channel 1. The good thing about that is, well, nobody else can jump in and talk, but the bad thing about that is that's wasted air, that's wasted spectrum that somebody could be using at that time when nobody else is. So technology came along and said, well, let's create this, what they call a trunk radio system. And what a trunk radio system is basically you have a pool of channels. In the case of DaneCom, you have 10 radio frequencies. And they're basically tossed into a hat. And then anytime somebody wants to talk on the system, regardless of what talk group or channel their radio says they're on, we dip into that pool of radio channels and find one that's not being used. And that transmission goes out on that particular radio channel. As soon as the person unkeys their mic, that radio channel goes back into that hat of frequencies that are available. As soon as that person keys up again, on the same talk group, they reach back into that hat and pull out perhaps a different channel and talk on it. Kind of sounds confusing, but think about a trunk radio system as going to the bank. You go to the bank and there's one line, you stand in that line, but there's 5 tellers. As soon as one teller is available, it doesn't matter which one it is, you gravitate over to that one. So you basically stand in line and wait for a channel. Sounds bad, but the marvels of technology allow all this to happen within 500 milliseconds, which is within half a second. So if I turn the radio on, when I'm turning the radio on, behind the scenes, this radio is transmitting a signal to the trunked, the big computer in the sky. And it's saying, hey, this is radio 1399923. I'd like to access DaneCom. And the DaneCom controller goes, okay, I see you're authorized to be on my radio system. What talk group do you want to be on? And I go, I want to be on DA Law 1. And the trunk system goes, okay, I see your radio ID and you're allowed to be on DA Law 1. So, okay, have at it. You can now listen to DA Law 1. All that happens in half a second, less than half a second. Now when I decide I want to talk, I'm going to go to a different channel other than Law 1. When I talk, when I key my mic, you're going to hear a beep. That beep is called a channel grant tone or a talk permit tone. When you hear that beep, after that you can talk. If you're talking as you're pushing the button and you don't hear that beep, anything you heard before that beep, no one else is going to hear. So, when somebody wants to talk, they push the button, that sends a signal to the big computer in the sky. The big computer says, okay, radio 1399923, you want to talk on Law 2. And the system goes, okay, let me find a available frequency for you to use. And it finds that frequency, one that's unused out of that pool of 10, and then sends a signal to all the other radios that are tuned to that particular talk group and says, okay, this radio wants to make a transmission, all these radios have to be listening on this particular radio channel. And all that's done in half a second or less without anybody touching the radio. Basically, these are big computers with antennas sticking out of them. There's a lot of back-end stuff that occurs. I will touch more on what happens when channels are all busy, and et cetera, but I want to kind of stick to my loose outline here. So that's a real quick overview of a trunk system. Going a little bit further, we decided DaneCom is going to be a digital system. And for lack of a better term, and I seem to use that term an awful lot when I talk, but a digital system actually changes your voice into ones and zeros. Bits and bytes of information are turned into ones and zeros, which are then transmitted over the air, go to the big controller eventually, and then get farmed back out by the one in repeater fashion. Advantages to that, again, we've got 8 different transmitters and receivers for DaneCom. Let's say you're driving along, I don't know, in this area, and you decide you want to talk on the radio. So you talk on the radio, and for whatever reason, you're being picked up by the Stoughton Tower. So Stoughton Tower is receiving all your ones and zeros that you're talking. But there's, let's say you make a 5-second transmission. There's 1 second of that transmission that Stoughton doesn't pick up, but Sun Prairie does. Because everybody's listening. All these towers are listening for your information. So the system is smart enough in near real time to take the bits and bytes of what you're taught, what we received in Stoughton, and then the missing ones that Sun Prairie picked up, and put them all together into something that everyone can understand. And you may hear that, they sort of have that with the existing Sheriff's Channel 1 right now with all the receivers that we have set up around. If you're listening and somebody's talking and they sound crystal clear, and then midway through the transmission you can hear a little hiss in the background, That's the voting sites that the old system has switching around trying to give you the best signal. In the case of digital, you're not going to hear that hiss. Digital, like it or not, there is no static with digital. You either have a signal or you don't. That can cause problems and a learning curve as well. With a digital system, whether I'm standing directly right underneath the radio tower, this is the radio tower, and I'm talking, or if I am at the theoretical end of coverage, it's going to sound more or less the same. The bad thing is, if I take one step away from the theoretical end of coverage, I'm not going to get into the system, and the system's not going to be able to read it. So it's a little bit of a learning curve, because right now, with the existing Sheriff's Channel 1, you know when you're starting to get further and further from coverage because you'll hear more static, right? You're not going to get that with this, so you're going to have to learn all new dead spots and all new places where the radio is going to work where it didn't before. Talk a little bit about digital sound quality. Anybody here remember back when there were analog cell phones? The old analog cell phones, maybe they had a big brick that they carried around with them and they talked. And then when you got your very first small state-of-the-art digital cell phone and you made or you received your first call on it and you knew the person was speaking English but you couldn't quite understand them for a few seconds. Now everybody's got these digital cell phones and you just kind of take it for granted and you can understand. You've trained your ear to listen to digital transmissions. Same is true for our radio system. Things are going to sound a little bit different. Some people sound better than others, just kind of like on an analog system as well. But there is a learning curve of sorts. So the more opportunity that you have to pick up a radio that's been programmed to DaneCom and monitor DA Law 1, which is simulcasting Sheriff's Channel 1 right now, the better off you'll be when we do our switchover. I did touch on signal strength a little bit. Again, to put it in a nutshell, you're either going to have a signal or you're not. There's very little in between. Current Sheriff's Channel 1 is kind of what they call an unbalanced system, meaning we have one transmitter down here that supposedly services the entire area. We all know that's not entirely true. To augment receiving, they set up, I think it's 10 or 11 receiving stations all around the time, so they receive all your. So dispatch has a better chance of hearing you than you do of dispatch right now. With DaneCom, the system is much more what they consider balanced. If we can hear you, chances are you can hear us. Unlike the current system, especially I know up in the DeForest area, they had some problems till they put a receive site out there. So the system is better balanced. So I was mentioning that these particular radios are more like computers with antennas on them. That's exactly true because again they're constantly talking when they're on to the mothership or to the big computer in the sky. Also, a lot of information you can get from looking at the display on these. And one thing that you'll notice is it'll tell you before you even hit your button if you're going to be able to get through or not. And it'll tell you that it depends on your radio manufacturer. With a Harris radio, if I can't get a signal, it will tell me CC scan, meaning control channel scan. This radio is looking for that big computer in the sky and can't find it. That's a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing, and again, a big learning curve. And I'll use an example, and I don't mean to pick on Stop and Go or anything, but currently if you walk into Stop and Go with your portable at your hip, and you go over to the espresso machine to grab an espresso or a cappuccino or whatnot, your portable may not work right in that very spot. But the dumb radios that you guys have now aren't smart enough to tell you that they're not working. You just assume it's working because life goes on and sometimes you hear things, sometimes you don't. This same radio, you might go buy that coffee machine and all of a sudden the radio's going, hey, I'm not working. And right away you're going to think, oh my gosh, the system is horrible, it doesn't work right here. Well, chances are it probably didn't work with the old system as well. It's just now you're better informed as to where your radio works and where it doesn't work. When your radio doesn't work, I got to simulate this by taking off the antenna. Radio goes into control channel scan, and eventually it will actually go into something called band scan. I'm not sure how your radios are set up. If it'll look around for the mothership for a while. If it can't find its home mothership, it'll actually look for other motherships that it can link onto. But anyway, if you can't get a signal, or you're not paying attention, or you're not in a position to look, and you want to transmit, and you hear this, or something similar, we call that a bonk, and they sound very similar depending on the radio manufacturer. That means you're not going anywhere. You're not transmitting out or anything. Now, if you keep, in some radios, if you keep your finger on the transmit key, once you do get into an area where it'll work, it'll let you know, and then you can start talking. Others, you're just kind of out of luck, and it depends on the radio manufacturer that you have. And I screwed this antenna back on, and before I even got it screwed on completely, I was back on DaneCom again. So it's pretty quick. I mean, this thing will acquire a signal when it can get a signal. Speaking of signal, I'm going to touch a little bit on the emergency button that Rick was talking about. The cool thing about the emergency button, regardless of whether or not you're going to be transmitting 10 seconds of audio or not, is even if your portable does not have a signal, and you hit that emergency button, oops, the portable will keep trying to reach the control channel to be able to get that emergency alert out to different people. So you push it, and you know, if you're fighting with somebody or whatnot, and you just get into a position where it can see the control channel for a half a second, it's going to shoot that alarm out. So even if you currently don't have any reception at the time you push it, the radio will faithfully keep trying until it can get that message across. Only need a half a second. Important to remember with the trunk system that when you push down your button, you have to wait for that channel grant tone before you start talking. Anything you say before that tone is not going to go out anywhere. You tend to cut yourself off. And it is just like a fraction of a second longer than what is out there right now with the current law one. So you want to make sure to be cognizant. Do you guys have the channel grant tone on yours?
It isn't, but I'll probably have it put on there.
It's a good idea, and I think, depending if you got Motorola's,
APX 6000, yeah.
I think you can actually control how loud that beep is too, because you don't want something that's super loud, especially if you're trying to be doing super sneaky stuff. But it's good to have, just as a reminder as far as when you can talk. So I mentioned these radios are smart, and they are, but they can also rat you out. The radio and the radio system knows who's on the system at any given time, who's talking at any given time, what talk group you're on, and when you turn your radio off. So it's kind of like having Big Brother on your hip. Bad thing for those that like to, should we say, be less than professional on the radio, aka crotch rub, for example, your radio is going to rat you out. As soon as you hit your button to transmit out, not only does the controller know who's transmitting, but everybody else who's looking at the display at the time knows who's transmitting as well. A lot of the radios, and I think if I remember right, yours actually are alias now, but the radios will display the 7-digit radio ID of whoever's transmitting at the time. Some radios, and I think the town, correct me if I'm wrong, you actually went ahead and threw an alias file into the radios.
Yep.
So instead of seeing a 7-digit number, you actually see a name or an officer ID.
Our last name will come up on the radio when you push the button.
And I forget what it is up in dispatch that we programmed. If it's last name, it's probably last name that comes up to the dispatcher as well. So, Big Brother's watching, which is a good thing and a bad thing all at the same time. Talk a little bit about what they call system busies. Understandably, we have 10 channels that we can work with DaneCom. We're going to have, my latest check, I think we were up to 250 different talk groups. Obviously, all 250 can't talk at once, and we're banking on the fact that that doesn't happen. But should it happen, and I cannot demonstrate this right now because we have too many channels up, but you may key your radio up to talk, and you won't hear that bonk, and you won't hear that channel grant tone, but you'll hear something in between. It'll be a different tone, and if you happen to be looking at your radio at the time, it'll say something similar to queued. That means there are no radio channels available for you to talk, but we're putting you in line. We don't expect that to happen a lot. I'd rather not have it happen at all. But on a trunk system, there are the chance of that happening. The cool thing is that the talk groups all have a pecking order or a priority. And the main dispatch channels or talk groups will have a higher priority than anybody else. So the chances of you getting queued for anything longer than just a very short period of time would be very slim. Trunk system will also have a capability of giving a pecking order to individual radios. The way this system's set up, we can't do that yet, and so we stuck with the talk groups having individual priorities, with one exception. When somebody pushes their emergency button, that radio gets bumped up to the very top of the list, has the highest priority of any radio on the system, as do any transmissions on the talk group that they're on after that until the emergency is cleared. So if somebody declares an emergency and DaneCom is really busy, you're not going to get queued, or you have a infinitesimal chance of getting queued. You'll have top priority all the time.
Is your system keeping track of those queues?
It
So
will.
We'll
yeah.
be able to know on a
Yep.
quarterly basis
Yes.
how many queues, okay.
Yeah, the reporting capabilities of the system, I'm just starting to dip into now. But yeah, we can tell how many people were on a particular talk group at any particular given time, how long they talked, what's the total amount that was talked on this talk group, so many different reports that can be generated. And I've just scratched the surface on a lot of that. Okay, we talked a little bit about the emergency button already. Take away some confusion. People hear the term DaneCom, and you may think about DaneCom as being just the voice portion of the radio system. Everybody that talks about DaneCom thinks we're talking about Law 1 or Law 2 or Law 3 or Law 4. DaneCom is actually a suite of radio systems. And the P25 system, or Project 25 trunked radio system that DaneCom is one subsystem. We have other subsystems. In fact, some of them are in use today. Paging. I don't know how many of you heard that we switch paging frequencies around, but we're currently using the new paging system. The new paging system is a little different than the old paging system. We actually transmit from 7 different sites. Take away McKee and WMGN, we transmit from everybody with the yellow pins and also from this red pin over here. We have 2 different separate mutual aid subsystems, and this is kind of important to talk about for people that don't have access to DaneCom. So if you have an out-of-county unit that comes in that does not have a radio that's programmed for DaneCom, they can come onto these frequencies and still reach the dispatch center. We have 2 different flavors of mutual aid. The first we call mutual aid mobile coverage. And what that is it guarantees EMSB and point-to-point as what they call a mobile coverage guarantee. Harris guaranteed us 95% coverage over the entire county using a mobile radio. Obviously, portable radios would be a whole lot less. Am I boring people too much? All right. We also have what we call mutual aid portable, which Harris says, okay, we'll cover 95% of the county to somebody who has a portable radio standing out in the street and on their hip. And those particular channels, I'll just rattle them off here: VCall 10, VTAC 12, VLAW 31, Mark 1 and 2, and iFern. These particular channels are also going to be used, and I wish Rick would have covered it a little bit, but for those that are coming in who do not have DaneCom radios, they'll be able to switch to any one of those channels, and my guess will be VCall 10, to call the communications center. And from there, we can either patch VCall 10 in with our trunk system or move them to one of the additional mutual aid channels to be able to talk and listen to DaneCom at the time. Should DaneCom go down, in the unlikely event that it would go down, everyone will end up switching over to VCall 10 at this point, and you'll still be able to reach the dispatch center. And again, VCall 10 is covered with the 95% coverage guarantee of anyone that has a radio standing outside with the radio at their hip. Obviously, if you raise the radio up to your mouth, your antenna is a little bit higher, and it's going to work even better. We also have an analog tactical subsystem. This is a radio channel that is not on DaneCom, not on the trunk system. It's an analog resource that's being used that also has a 95% coverage guarantee. And analog tactical is at all, again, 7
Yeah.
of the DaneCom sites, including Deerfield. Primarily, it's going to be used for firefighting, but there's no reason why, again, depending on how protocols go, that it couldn't be used for a law response as well. Advantages to that, you're off of DaneCom. And I hate to say it, but DaneCom's not going to work everywhere. No radio system is. If you're in the sub-basement of some bunker and somebody else is standing up on top of that bunker, you guys are probably not going to be able to talk to each other on DaneCom. Because if you're in that bunker down here, for example, and that person's trying to talk out, they have to talk out to one of these sites in order to be heard. If you're 3 stories down under dirt and lead and concrete and all that, you're not going to get out. So if you use this conventional radio channel to talk out on, which doesn't rely on the DaneCom infrastructure, you're talking radio to radio. You have to have a much better chance of being able to reach people that are in the middle of something in the deep dark depths of a building. Does that make sense? Okay. And the last subsystem that DaneCom has is, believe it or not, the outdoor warning sirens, the tornado sirens. They retrofitted a lot of that, put some new infrastructure behind the scenes to allow us to set off the warning sirens as needed. Questions?
Brigham Tower, probably was asked before, why was that not hooked up or turned on? Or?
Well, with Brigham, and they actually only talked about using Brigham as an analog tactical site out here. And the problem that they had with Brigham is they do these things, they're called structurals on towers. Anytime you want to put anything on a tower, on an existing tower, you have to do what they call structural. And that's where they analyze the tower and make sure it can, hold up the 10-pound weight that you're going to put on it, without toppling over. Every year they change those specs and they make them more stringent. And the Brigham Tower, as it stands right now, doesn't pass the current structural if it was empty. Doesn't mean it's going to fall over tomorrow, but it's just with the new structurals that are in place as of last year, we couldn't put anything on it even if it was empty. I guess that brings me up to another thing. Some of you may have heard about roaming between the WISCOM system and the DaneCom system. We're working on it. We actually have what they call an ISSI in place, which is basically a gateway between the 2 systems. It has been tested, and it does work. It's not currently in place, nor do I expect it to be in place anytime soon. But eventually, the goal is to have WISCOM kind of augment DaneCom coverage, especially in the southwestern part of the county where there are going to be some coverage challenges with anyone who's using a portable. And seamless roaming will work just like your cell phone does. So you'll turn your radio on to DA Law 1, and your radio is happily monitoring DA Law 1 on the DaneCom system. And you drive, maybe you have to go into Fort Atkinson for whatever reason. So you're heading into Fort Atkinson, and your radio goes, I'm about to lose DaneCom. What am I going to do? I'm going to keep looking for DaneCom. So it looks for a period of time, of seconds. And if it can't find DaneCom, it'll go and it'll say, well, are there any other systems that I can use? And so your radio will contact the WISCOM big computer in the sky, and the WISCOM computer will actually connect your radio to DaneCom via WISCOM. So your radio will reside on a WISCOM tower using the WISCOM infrastructure, but you'll still be able to talk and receive DA Law 1 traffic that's coming from DaneCom. So very similar to how your cell phone works, and this will all be without you having to touch anything on your radio. It'll just happen all by itself. Do we have that yet? No, not yet. That's something that's still being worked on. Real quick, I'll cover front page of the DaneCom cheat sheet, which has some cells. Kind of give you an idea of just a sampling of what talk groups or channels are going to be available on the system. Obviously, this isn't all of them, and I've kind of wrote this more aimed towards the town of Madison, but it's still relevant for everyone else as well. DA Law 1 will be Sheriff's Channel 1. That's going to be your main dispatch channel or talk group. DA Law 2 is going to be Talk Around. And if you notice, Talk Around is in quotations because it's a simulated talk around. Your current talk around has very relatively limited range. The talk group range, or I'm sorry, the talk around range with Law 2 will be the entire system. So somebody that's way down in the southwestern part of the county will be able to hear somebody in the northeastern part of the county on talk around. Provided your radios are configured properly, it should work very similar to how your existing Law 1, Sheriff's Channel 1, and Sheriff's Channel 2 talk around work today. I also included a Law 3 and a Law 4, just in anticipation of split county dispatch eventually. I could have left those out and not put them in, but it would have screwed my numbering scheme up when I decided I wanted to, I was told I needed to add them in there. So I continue that. Data is no longer Channel 3 or won't be Channel 3 anymore. It will actually be data. TAC channels or TAC talk groups, we have 3 of them, and they'll be referred to as LTAC 13, 14, 15, which will correspond to one of your zones that should have 13, 14, and 15 in them as your law tags. Those will be used for anything that you normally use 5 for today, or anything you can dream up that you might need a separate talk group for. One of the ideas of how DaneCom came to fruition was interoperability. You know, there might be a time when you need to talk to the town of Albion dump truck. I can't think of a reason now, but you might have to at some point in time. DaneCom will allow you to be able to do that, or give you the capability to be able to do that without having any of their information programmed into your radios. And that's what these next ones that are shaded, it's supposed to be green, but on black and white it just kind of looks gray. We have 4 what they call event talk groups, and these can be used for planned or non-planned events, emergency or non-emergency events. And while we can't mandate that those 4 talk groups are in every radio, we are sure, strongly suggesting that all 4 of those talk groups end up in every radio that can come on the DaneCom system. Reason for that, you guys will all have these 4 channels or talk groups in your radio somewhere, so will that town of Albion dump truck. And that can come into play if we have a big tornado that comes through and we're bringing the DPW resources in from all over. We can assign everyone to one of these event channels or event talk groups, and everyone can be able to talk to one another without confusion. Underneath the event talk groups, I just threw on, at the time I did this, there were 2 Town of Madison talk groups. There are now 3. These are locally controlled. Town of Madison PD has a talk group, can be used for whatever Town of Madison PD wants it to be used for. Fire department also has a talk group. Interestingly enough, EMS didn't want a separate one for them. And then just recently I added the Town of Madison Department of Public Works onto it because they asked for a talk group as well. Again, locally controlled. You may have seen a talk group list at any particular time go out. Just because there's a talk group on the list doesn't mean they're going to use it. I've assigned them a talk group, let them know it exists. It's up to them as to how and when they use it. Next talk group is DA Page, and that's just a way to monitor the paging system while you're on DaneCom. Why do we have that? Scanning a trunk system and an analog paging channel at the same time on the same radio doesn't work out. And one of the main reasons why it doesn't work out is when you scan, you actually have to leave whatever channel you're listening to, even if it's just for a fraction of a second, and go and listen to this other channel and see if there's anybody talking on it. When you come off, even for a split second, of a trunked radio system, and then you come back again, the system, once again, within a half a second, has to affiliate itself with the system and say, I'm back, I'm here, and this is the channel I'm monitoring. In that particular point in time, you could miss a transmission. So while some of the radios will scan the paging channel as well as DaneCom, you probably shouldn't, because you may miss important transmissions on Law 1. And in that half a second, you could miss an emergency. So we are actually rebroadcasting the paging system on a DaneCom talk group, so your DaneCom radios can scan it without missing anything on Law 1. And then at the bottom, I put 3 additional talk groups that we have. We've got links in place with MPD1, and that's will be bidirectional. It's not right now. So we've got a DaneCom talk group that is connected, for lack of a better term, to the city's radio system on MPD1. We'll also have one for MPD3, and currently we also will have one in place for Madison Fire Department Channel 1, but it'll be for receive only and with no ability to transmit on it. Any questions? I'm running out of stuff at this point.
At this point, I think it's probably a good time for us to talk about our radios and how we have them set up. And I learned after the last in-service that there was a lot of confusion. I sat down with Kurt, explained it to him how it worked, and I'm hoping I can explain it to you guys similarly so you kind of understand it. Our home zone, the zone you guys are going to live on, is going to be Z. 99% of the time, you'll never have to leave Zone Z. That's where you're gonna live. We're gonna have our local talk group, which will be Channel 7. We'll have the fire department talk group, which they're gonna be living on our channel as well, unless they have special events that they're dealing with. And then we're also gonna have the DPW channel. DPW is gonna live on their channel, unless they need to get a hold of us, then they'll switch over to our talk group and talk to us. I primarily see that occurring, during the day like they do now, or on the evenings for snow plowing issues that they're having. And those are in, it's going to be, I think it's 6, 7, and 8, 7 being the PD channel for us. We are also going to have MPD channel 1 and MPD channel 3 in our Zone Z. So they're right there, because that's who we talk with the most. And the tactical channels that Chad had talked about will be there, 13, 14, and 15, and then the analog tactical channel on channel 16. They'll all be there as well. And then, of course, the 1 through 5. DA Law 1, DA Law 3, those simulated talk-arounds, and then data is going to be on channel 5. Darn near every zone that we have, it's going to be that way, but your home zone, Z, that's what it's going to be. Does that make sense, Bert? Is that?
Yeah, that's basically it. I mean, everything we have right now on our radios, with the exception of like trying to talk to Sun Prairie or Fitchburg or Middleton or anything like that, is all going to be on the Z group. And it's like the chief said, that's where we're going to be up and running probably 99% of the time. It's just like it is. If they say go to TAC 13, you'll go to channel 13. If they go to, TAC 14, which would be like our old TAC 5 or whatever, that's where we're going to be going to. I really foresee a lot of the cars in the town monitoring channel 7, which is our town PD channel. I'm sorry, channel 6 now, which will be our local office. You want to get a hold of Claudia or Jan or somebody back at the PD, you'll call on channel 6 and switch back between that and channel 1, and that's where we're going to be 99% of the time. If you wanted to run something on data, instead of going to 3, you'll go to channel 5, and that's the way it's going to be. I mean, unless we get sent to Milwaukee or some big thing with where we're going to go to Zone J to talk to the DNR for some mishap on Lake Winger or something, I mean, you're going to have to figure it out, or somebody's going to write on the board for that operation, go to Zone J, channel 11, and you'll be on DNR operational channel White Bravo, if for whatever reason we got to switch over there.
And the zones are set up so if we're at an event, for example, if we're doing an OWI task force, we will have a pre-planned with dispatch that we're going to use event X. And then event is going to be on zone E because it starts with E. That's how we plan that. But we'll have it on the whiteboard, zone E channel 8 is where we're going to be living for that event, and we can switch your radio. DPW is going to be in our, we're going to have it in our Z. That's because that change was made 2 days ago.
And actually, I misspoke before. Our Channel 7 is gonna be Channel 7 because that's gonna be our talk group for our Channel 7. I said 6 before, and I was looking at, that was our old Channel 7, which is now gonna be converted over to DPW, which we'll be able to monitor also because they're going to the trunk system. So I misspoke before. So really, our Channel 7 is still our Channel 7, just like we would. So the channels we're gonna be monitoring primarily is gonna be Channel 7 and Channel 1. And I mean, I'm sure there's gonna be some guys that work nights that wanna punch in Fitchburg or whatever, and they should be able to take care of all that too.
Well, then you'll have Weaver scanning about 12 or 15
Right.
different channels.
I was waiting for something.
Right. So everything in our Zone Z is gonna be in there. And let me just touch base really quick on the radio coverage. The 2 radios are there. I suggest you go put them on Zone Z Channel 7 sometime when you're working, and you can test them and see where they're working. Jess and I went out one night, and she took one and I took the other one, and I can tell you, go on American TV or what's soon to be in that empty building at 2404 West Beltline Highway, you get about 2 steps from the front door and it is dead. Every time you key that mic, it just burr, 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 burr. Badger Bowl, we went down there, and it was hit and miss. I mean, in the center, believe it or not, the center of Badger Bowl, they worked fine, but if you took 5 steps one way, they were useless. You took 5 steps the other way, they were useless. And the good part of it is, the positive side of everything is, I went over to the Madison Market on Fordham Avenue, and Jess was driving down on Pheasant Ridge, and she said it was like we were just talking car to car, because it was so clear. I went up to Hannah's, and she went some other place, and it was car to car. I mean, it was super clear. So I think for us, you know, using our Channel 7 on a trunk channel is going to be really advantageous for a lot of the kind of special things that we end up doing.
One thing I'd like to point out, sorry for interrupting.
No, please.
The system is up right now. It's functioning in limited channel capacity. I'm actually trying to free up an additional channel with more people coming on and playing with the system, which I encourage. It's leading to a lot of people getting queued, and I want to try to avoid that. But keep in mind, with the system only being not ready for quote-unquote prime time at this point, it could go down at any reason for testing or adjusting, things like that. It's also suffering from some interference that we're working on clearing up as well. And how you can tell that you're being interfered with is when somebody's talking and you're listening to somebody talk and they're standing still, they're not moving, and yet they fade out. That's interference on a trunk system, and we're working to clear that up. So those are a couple of reasons why we haven't gone live yet, and we don't plan to go live for weeks and weeks at this point.
Once they go live, you'll know that they're gonna go live because a burn-in period will start. And that burn-in period, I think, is gonna be basically county public works.
Yeah, we're gonna, the burn-in period is a contractual thing that says, okay, we're turning everything on, we're lighting everything up for 30 days, and just to kind of, I don't know, put it through its paces and make sure things are working. We're already putting it through its paces now, but contractually we get 30 days. Should something happen within that 30 days, depending on what it is, the burn-in countdown for that 30 days will stop until that thing is fixed, and then it will resume. And in some cases of catastrophic failure in something, burn-in will actually start all over again for 30 days. But yeah, I digress. Yeah, Dane County Highway will be on at burn-in, as will townships of Westport, Vienna, and Springfield. They'll all be jumping on board at some point in time during burn-in as well.
So once that burn-in period starts, we'll get Chad will send an email out, I'll forward that up to everybody, so you'll all know that the burn-in starts. And at that point, kind of make the assumption in a month, we're gonna be switching over and going from, by that time, all of our radios will be reprogrammed. So you'll be going from zone 1 to, once we go live, to zone Z. And it'll be really the big difference for you at that point. And that makes perfect sense to me, and I'm seeing a lot of confusion. So, any other questions for Chad or myself or Bert, anybody?
Do you think that, I mean, I've experienced it, those metal buildings are really an issue with radio system. That's
Yeah.
where I find a lot of dead spots.
Yeah, the metal buildings
Metal
are-
things and anything.
Yeah, they're gonna be terrible, like I said, we figured when we went to American TV, it was gonna be terrible anyway, when you had to go both, because they're all metal buildings, metal roof, metal siding. So those were probably the worst case scenarios. But, you know, like I said, from Madison Market, in fact, there's a little button you can push where you get the signal strength. And in Madison Market, it was like 110 on the Fordham Avenue side, and down around here, we were getting like 85s, but, you know, it is what it is. And it's no different now than what, it's not gonna be any different now than what it already is. I mean, American TV's always been a dead building for us regardless. Well, you'll know
On these
it
two
is.
portables, once you're in the DaneCom zone, if you push the bottom button down here, it'll give you RSSI, and here it's 82. And I think if it's in the 70s, is that right?
No, actually with RSSI, real quick, the RSSI actually is negative numbers, but if you just forget about the negative number, lower numbers are better, higher
Oh.
numbers are worse.
Okay.
If you see 130, that means your radio's not working at all.
Oh, that was explained to me differently, so I'm glad you brought it
Yeah,
up.
Yep.
are you sure? Because we were getting like 58s and 60s in American TV where we couldn't get anything, but yet when we went
You
outside.
know, they could have those programmed with a pseudo signal strength. I'm not sure how high it would go up on there. Normally, signal strength is negatives, and negative 46 is like a perfect signal, and negative 130 is no signal at all. They may have some proprietary thing in those that shows something else.
That's probably what it
Okay.
is.
Is there a minus sign in front of those?
No.
No, we never saw minus. When we were American TV and hit, it was like 58, 62, 63, and you couldn't talk at all.
Okay,
So you
yeah, so
keep it
Motorola
right.
does things a little differently than I'm aware of.
Right.
So, yeah, I guess in your case, then the higher the number, the
Higher
better.
higher the better.
Yeah.
Yes? Somebody had a question?
Just wanted to check quickly out. On the Zone Z or whatever, we got the city 1 and 3 and 1. That's not the channel we typically ever talk on. It's usually you can go to city 7 or 5. Where is that going to get patched up?
We will have the capability, trying to think of an easy way to explain this. We'll have the capability to be able to patch you in. You will basically go to a particular talk group. You know, we may get assigned to an LTAC or something like that.
And then to switch out to Z.
Yeah,
No,
well,
LTAC's in 13, 14, and 15.
Okay.
so, you know, we'll assign you to a talk group, probably an LTAC, and then we will patch that LTAC in with the city, you know, A7 or A8 or A9. We have, go ahead. We have very few talk groups that are going to be permanently patched to the city side, and we're limited by a lot of things. But through some genius work on Harris's part, actually, we were able to patch things together so we could actually include quite a few more city talk groups into the trunk system if we had to.
How would anything be affected if big crybabies get the range from this space? Would that be,
It's always a possibility. I mean, every now and then people scream, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. And I mean, I guess it depends on the agency. I mean, let's say Sun Prairie, for instance, decided they were gonna cut the cord and, you know, fly and do their own thing even more than they're doing now. They still plan on using DaneCom, so, you know, it's not gonna be affected. If the city decides to pull the plug and start their own dispatch center, again, it's not directly gonna affect us because they don't use DaneCom, they have their own radio system.
Well, not that it would probably ever happen for us, but we still wouldn't be able to just talk to the city. It would still have to be patched.
No, channels, City Channel 1 and City Channel 3 are hard
You're not
patched.
patched.
Yep, and there's actually a talk group on the DaneCom side for City 1 and City 3 that you can directly switch to and come on and talk.
And those are two channels that we put in our home because we work with the city so much.
So 11 and 12.
Yeah, 11 and 12. So if you were on channel 3 and you wanted to, you know, on the bell line, you wanted to talk to a cell site car, you'd be able to just basically switch your car radio to channel 12, and you'd be automatically up on your channel 3, you know, if you want to open up the road or close the road or, you know, something simple, versus a prolonged tactical type of operation. And assuming then you'd be patched up on an LTAC, and we'd say go to LTAC 13, 14, 15.
Did Madison have top-down too?
Not that we have access to them. They have simulated talk rooms, like their channel 4 is a simulated talk room. But we don't have that. Just on our city radio splash.
Yeah, just on city radio.
Zone Z.
No, I mean, they don't, one of these, you can't switch them, they're different zones, they get all specific.
That's a limitation.
That would be nice.
That's why you have a city radio in the smart car.
Right.
Any other questions for Chad at all?
Chad, are we still gonna be able to talk to Sauk and Iowa counties directly?
What you'll end up doing is switching your radios are what they call backwards compatible with the older systems. So, Sauk uses a, narrow-banded conventional VHF system. Should it be programmed into your radio, you'll be able to just tune your radio over to the Sauk channel and jump on it and talk.
So we can program into like Zone Z?
However you guys would like to do that, yeah, but you will be able to do that. Iowa County's a little bit different because Iowa County uses Wisconsin for their primary dispatch. I think they've got a way with analog that you can get in there, but I believe Iowa County uses Wiscom, which you would need your radio's provision for Wiscom. Keeping in mind when you are on Sauk's channel then, even if you're trying to scan DaneCom, it's not going to be reliable for DaneCom.
If you want to add a walkthrough later on, like once we're live, you want another walkthrough, are we able to do that?
Absolutely.
We have to go through you to do that?
Yeah, just ask me, and I'll work out where you can drop the $10,000 on our bills. No, actually, it's easy. Talk groups, I tell everyone, talk groups are cheap. I can assign those left and right. It's not a big thing at all for me. It takes me 30 seconds to add a talk group. It will take longer for your programmers to program the talk groups than it does for me.
Just touching base on what the Chief of Cross Plains says, so that would be the same problem for like Iowa, Sauk, or Green coming into Dane County. They're gonna have to get programmed up if they wanna communicate.
Correct, and I'm actually running into a little bit of that now. For whatever reason, a lot of the law enforcement agencies around are skittish about coming on DaneCom. They're like, what's it gonna cost? I'm like, nothing. Really? Are you sure?
Other than the fact that the radios would have to get programmed.
They need the radios programmed. The plan currently would be, when we go live, and of course get this out to our surrounding counties, to tell them if you need to reach Dane County Dispatch, come to VCall 10. Because in any of the radios, you can program those conventional analog channels. We'll receive that, and then we can either assign them another analog channel, or we can patch them directly to DaneCom on VCall 10.
Did the list of all the zones go out to you guys? Zone O has all of the other counties in that particular zone.
Yes.
So,
I was simply looking at putting it on our Zone Z,
yep,
because that's what we have for, like, you're trying to simulate what you have now, that's what we would do in Zone Z.
and that's what, yeah,
That's where we'd spend 99% of our time.
yep. Like you wouldn't have MPD 1 and 3 in there, you would have Sauk County in there, or whatever county.
Right.
So are these zones, like in zone O, we should be able to talk to these agencies, right?
Yes,
We switch it over.
yep. But know that if you are on a channel that does not have a DA in front of it, you're no longer on the DaneCom system, so you're not scanning your primary channel. That may not make a difference with whatever you're doing, but it's important to know that. Is that correct?
Yep.
Otherwise, if Chad doesn't have anything else, we've got, I think we're good.
Yeah, nothing else. One thing I just happened to think of, which has nothing to do with what we were just talking about, but seeing your radio there reminded me, talk about the system being really smart and knowing where you are and all that. If you ever lose your radio, I can turn it off. So if you lose it and somebody's, playing around on the system with it, making unauthorized stuff, I can turn it off, which is kind of neat. Just all of a sudden it just turns it into a paperweight.
It saves you locate it.
No, I can't locate it. That'd be really cool if I could. You might be able to triangulate it. I mean, I might be able to figure out, which towers are receiving, the signal. I'll try to get an idea, but that would take a lot of work. But at least I can kill it. The bad thing about killing it is I'm not killing the radio, I'm killing the identification of the radio. So, if you had radio 131, radio 8610, I'd be killing that ID, so you need a totally different ID. You couldn't just program, get a new radio and program it at 131-8610, it's still report. There now. Got nothing.
Put a GPS on one, right? Smart.
Some radios do have GPS. There's a Harris radio that costs like $7,000, but it's got what they call it, presence indication on it. It'll actually, when you key up on conventional channels, it'll show a person who has their Harris radio, it'll show a little dot where they think they are.